So you're sick of paying for film scans, hey? Or you just want more control over your results? Maybe you're already using a film lab, but you want to be able to rescan certain shots. My name's Hesham, you're watching Pushing Film, and welcome if you're new here. This video is going to be my updated guide to using a digital camera to quote-unquote scan your film. I'm going to break it down into 3 tiers of expense and difficulty, which are organized using chapter markers. I'll go into the common workflow for all 3 tiers, and other tips to help you enhance your results. This video is brought to you by Flexispot, and I'll talk more about them later. The first tier will be the I just want scans category, as cheap as possible and using as much equipment as you already own. The second tier will be the I'm invested category. You'll need to spend more money upfront, but can expect better results, especially if you refine your workflow. Your initial investment will pay for itself pretty quickly if you shoot a significant amount of film. The third tier will be the I want to make my life hard category. Here, you'll spend more money and or time in the pursuit of perfection. At this level, you probably shoot a whole lot of film to justify the commitment. The time investment will be heavy, but that can be offset by dumping more money into it. Naturally, you can strike a balance between different categories or jump between them. For example, I'm invested, but I often like to make my life harder than necessary. Let's start off with some important information and best practices. Number 1, expect a learning curve. You'll gain efficiency and consistency in your results over time. Number 2 is to support your local lab where possible. DIY saves you money, but at the expense of time. So ideally you want to enjoy this on some level to appreciate the trade-off. Number 3 is to keep things clean and static free. I have an old video with tips for getting cleaner scans and reducing static when dealing with film. These 2 things are your enemy when it comes to scanning, especially if you don't have infrared dust removal like many lab scanners do. Number 4 is that uncut film is faster to digitize. If getting a lab to process your film, ask them to leave it uncut. Strips will take longer, but you can get specific holders for dealing with strips or mounted slides more efficiently. And number 5 is to keep a level camera and controlled light. Use a mirror to level the camera with your film and avoid any stray light and reflections where possible. In all 3 tiers, the premise is the same. You use a light to illuminate your film, capture frames with a digital camera, and then invert the negatives in post. Unless you're capturing slide film, which is already positive. You'll ideally want a digital camera with the ability to focus close. So a macro lens is best, but there are workarounds. It's best to use something to hold the camera steady, like a tripod, a copy stand, or a camera arm on the side of a table. The more rigid, the better. You don't want vibrations. Ideally, you want some way to hold your film flat, like a dedicated film holder. The last bit of equipment is a clean and even light source. Ideally, this will be completely diffused, unless you're using a film holder with a built-in diffuser in it. You can buy setups that combine a few of these components into one, and I'll talk more about those in the I'm invested chapter. Lastly, you'll want a computer or device to invert your images. Tier 1, you just want scans, even if it's quick and dirty. Here, you can go as simple as holding your film against some window light and taking a photo with your smartphone. Then you can use conversion apps or free software on your phone to invert the curves on negative film. This probably won't give you great results, so you can upgrade this by using rudimentary or DIY film holders and maybe a light source that you already have. An iPad screen, for example, can make quite a good light source for this purpose. You might already have an LED light panel lying around, or can get a cheap and simple one. But try not to put the film directly on the surface of the light or iPad. This can attract dust and make your scans pick up on patterns from the actual light source or screen. Better yet, use a proper digital camera if you already have one. You'll either want a macro lens, close-up filters, or another way to focus as close as possible. The idea is to place the camera over the film and completely level, then fill most or all of the sensor with the film frame. For example, you can use a tripod to hold the camera if you already have one. Many of them have a horizontal extension or a reversible neck section that lets you have the camera face down. This tier is all about using what you already have and getting creative. Don't overcomplicate things. Find ways to replicate some of the more expensive options by using DIY alternatives. For example, recycling old enlargers as copy stands, or using their included negative trays as film holders for scanning. Maybe you can build your own copy stand or use a 3D printed film holder. There are plenty of affordable pre-made options now, or you can get free plans to print something yourself from sites like Thingiverse. I'll also link a great guide to making a DIY copy stand in the video description. Once you have your images, use one of the many apps for inverting negatives on a PC or smart device. You can look up many free or low-cost options on either end. If going full manual, use something that lets you invert the curves manually and then tweak the RGB channels to your liking. For example, I like to use Snapseed on my Android phone. Tier 2 is the most common and sensible place to be. You shoot enough film to justify spending more money and like having control over the process. Here you'll want a mirrorless or DSLR camera, but don't worry too much about resolution or sensor size. Use what you already have, if possible. However, I highly recommend a good macro lens. You can use a regular lens with close-up filters or extension tubes, but I would suggest a decent macro lens over that, even if it's an older manual focus one that you can use with an adapter. So assuming you have a camera and macro lens, you can now go two different ways. The first one is an all-in-one system like the Veloy Easy or Blackbox 135 and other similar options. This way you won't need a copy stand or film holder and light source. But do your own research here, because there might be certain restrictions with film formats you can scan, whether you can scan uncut film only or cut film only, compatibility restrictions and other factors. Generally, I would recommend going with a modular system if you want more control and versatility, especially if you have the room for it. If going that way, you'll need a separate light source and film holder. There are plenty of options these days, especially compared to when I started. You can buy a ready-to-go copy stand like this one from Negative Supply or from many other brands. You can build your own copy stand like the one in this video by Alex that I mentioned earlier, or repurpose an enlarger. Otherwise, you can stick with using a tripod that allows you to face the camera horizontally, or even buy or make a camera arm to attach to a desk. Just make sure whatever you use is fairly rigid and doesn't easily shake or vibrate. Luckily, you no longer need to spend a crazy amount of money in this tier because there are so many options on the market. If you want a guide to a few popular film holders, I have a video all about that, which is linked below. My top recommendations include items like the Essential Film Holder, which I still recommend and think is one of the most versatile options. It does 35mm and 120 and has a great diffuser built in, which lets you use a greater variety of light sources by turning them into perfectly diffused light. The self-assembly option is good value at 65 British pounds, including free worldwide shipping. It's easy to assemble, and I have a separate video guide to that in the links. I would also recommend something from the basic line at Negative Supply, the Veloy carriers, or other similar options around the $100 mark. If you own or have access to a 3D printer, you can also get plans to print your own and get something extremely capable like the Tone Carrier with an advancing system. If you just buy the STL file and required hardware, it ends up being cheaper than the professional line from something like Negative Supply. Or they even have a free community version, which is manual feed. I'll be covering this whole topic of 3D printed items in the film photography space in a future video. Next thing is the light source, and in this tier, there are a number of ways to go. Basically, anything that gives you even high-quality light output. A high TLCI or CRI rating is generally a good sign, but more importantly, you want the light to be diffused, unless using a separate diffuser, as mentioned earlier. Again, I have separate videos talking about different light sources, and I'll link something below. You can go with something like this Viltrox that I've been recommending for ages, or any similar generic CCT video light. Or you can get dedicated film scanning light sources like the Negative Supply one, or the CineStill CS Lite, or their upcoming Spectracolor version. But if you're investing in all this right now, something with a cool light option like the CineStill CS Lite might be a good way to go. And if you do go with a generic video light, try and get one with a Kelvin that goes to a cooler level above 5600 Kelvin. The next evolution of this is a dedicated narrowband RGB film scanning light source like this one from Acute New Design that I've been testing, but I'll save that for the next tier. Once you have your setup, you'll want to jump ahead to the workflow and enhancements chapter. Okay, tier 3. You're nuts and you just want the best. But in 2025, you're in luck if you have endless money to blow. We have some great options on the market. I'll assume you already have a basic knowledge of camera scanning if you're here just for this category. At the very top end, you have the Filmomat auto carrier and various add-ons like the control panel and infrared capability for dust and scratch removal. I've never used this, and I think it's overkill for most users who aren't running a lab operation or similar. And with the total money investment, you could probably buy a lab scanner. However, the Filmomat is more compact, versatile, and future-proof. If you're not that crazy, you probably just want to go with the professional line from something like Negative Supply. Tried and true and solidly built. You also have Veloy and the tone carrier system that I mentioned earlier. These may not be electronic auto feed carriers, but they'll have a thumb wheel to advance the film to speed things up. The same applies to your copy stand. Look at the top line options from brands like Kaiser or others that I've mentioned already like Negative Supply. Get something that supports the camera that you intend to work with. For example, if you're going to use a GFX, make sure that the stand goes high enough and that it's heavy duty enough. There's also the brand called Cute New Design that I discovered recently on Taobao, and their items look very well engineered and impressive. As mentioned, I've been testing their RGB light, which I'll touch more on soon. When you're in this tier, you probably want some add-ons depending on the brand or ecosystem that you go with. Things like masks to shield stray light, special hoods, film brushes or film holders and catches are all good recommendations. Definitely get a system that you can level out easily, especially if you plan to swap between formats a lot. When it comes to light sources, this is where we're sitting on a bit of a new frontier, no pun intended. The Fujifilm Frontier lab scanner uses RGB light and a specialized sensor to capture each color channel separately and then combine them, which is part of what gives Frontier scans their vibrancy and magic. Replicating this concept with camera scanning can open up better results, but it adds complexity. If you have a regular Bayer sensor camera, it's not quite the same as using a monochrome sensor, but you can still get significantly better results than just using white light. The advantage here is that using cool light to counteract the orange mask on negative film gives you better results than just using white light and then balancing for the mask. It reduces crosstalk between the color channels in the film, and that can give you better color separation and more vibrancy. However, that's something that I'll probably have to save for a future video, and I would recommend doing your research if you choose to go this way. Most conversion software like NLP still isn't optimized to deal with scans made using RGB light, but give it a few months and I think a lot of progress will be made in this department. For now, you can't go wrong with the high-end dedicated light sources from the brands I've mentioned, or something affordable like the CineStill CS Lite or their upcoming Spectracolor version, which includes a cooling gel. Or you can always get a cooling gel yourself and try it with other lights. Something like an 82C should do the trick. But remember, every negative film has different mask color, and this won't be quite the same as projecting light at specific narrowband wavelengths through the film. If you do an experiment with proper RGB light, this one from Cute New Design is the only commercially one available at the time of me making this video. I can recommend it based on my usage so far, but I still need more time with it. There is also something called the Scanlight by Jack Whitaker, who published plans for a DIY build on GitHub. He's also taking orders for ready-made units over on Ko-Fi. These are an updated version and are assembled on a per order basis. He's also written some great information about the whole concept of narrowband RGB lights for scanning and is much better at explaining the science behind it than I am. So yeah, if you want to make your life hard, enjoy diving down that rabbit hole. So once you have your setup, this is the basic methodology that I would recommend. Use a small mirror over your film holder to level out your camera by aligning it so that the lens or sensor is visible perfectly in the middle of the reflection. There are video guides out there that go further into this technique if you need help. Feed your uncut film or cut film holder into your carrier and turn on your light. Reduce any stray or ambient light in the room and ideally use a hood or multiple hoods to shield the film. I would also recommend scanning your film on the emulsion side, which can reduce the chance of any reflections and allow sharper rendition of the grain in your resulting scans. But This isn't a big deal if you just scan the normal side up. Just remember to horizontally invert your scans later if you do digitize on the emulsion side like I do. Set your camera to manual exposure, raw file capture, and use manual white balance. You'll want to use the lowest ISO on your camera and an f-stop between f5.6 and f11, and whatever shutter speed gives you a nice even exposure. This will depend on how bright your light is, and you can use your camera's histogram, if available, to expose so that you have a nice even spread of information in the histogram. Generally, I find this puts you slightly above middle on a typical matrix meter readout. Once you've set them, your settings should ideally stay the same for the remainder of that roll. Capture all your frames while making sure to avoid vibration. Don't use the stabilization feature in your camera or lens to do this, but rather make sure everything is physically stable. Use a remote trigger if possible, especially if your shutter speeds are quite slow. Speaking of stability, I have everything set up on this desk by Flexispot, who have kindly sponsored this video. Besides being stable, I can adjust it to a height that prevents me from being hunched over too much while scanning. You might remember seeing me feature a Flexispot desk and chair in a past video where I replaced my old and shaky computer desk. I still love using that desk, and I happily accepted when they wanted to send me another E7 Pro to feature in this video. Once you get used to a good adjustable desk, it's hard to go back to a regular one. So I've got one for my computer station and another one here for shooting my videos, scanning film, or working with prints and negatives. Having preset height memory and USB power output in the controller is also handy. The E7 Pro is exceedingly strong. It can hold almost 200 kilograms. It has a semi-sea leg structure, making it balanced and stable. You get a cable management tray included with plenty of room to organize things. And of course, it's height adjustable to a broad range, so you can use it as a standing desk, find the perfect sitting height, or use it as an adaptable workstation for other tasks. They're easy to assemble, and I've put 2 of them together now myself with no problems. You have a variety of add-ons and options for tops, and I personally like the bamboo finish. You can upgrade your workspace and ergonomics with something like this for an affordable price. Flexispot Australia is running a spring sale until the end of August, and you can use the code PUSHINGFILM for an additional 10% off site-wide. You can also use this same code on the US site for 10% off the E7 Pro. So thank you to Flexispot for sponsoring another video here on the channel. Let's talk about converting negatives. You can of course do this manually or by using simple and sometimes free software, as I mentioned in Tier 1. I'll put links to some options that I've tried and some that I haven't. Follow the instructions for whatever software you're using and give it some time. You might need some trial and error to get used to things and achieve consistent results. In all of my testing, the best software I've used is still Negative Lab Pro. It's the most consistent and best at dealing with all the formats that I've tested. It's not perfect, but you can get great results and it's well worth the money. The latest version adds even more capability, and it's one of the main reasons that I still use Adobe Lightroom. If you want to try it, I'll put a link for a free trial in the description, and I'll also have an updated video coming all about using the latest NLP. An enhancement tip that I want to share with you in this video is about using light collimation. You can use something called a light collimation sheet, as with the ones that come optional on the CineStill CS Lite. These are available from sources like AliExpress and are a cheap way to collimate and brighten the light from your light source. That means higher shutter speeds and also a potentially sharper appearance of the grain, especially with black and white film. The next tip is one that I want to reiterate from the intro. Keep things clean and dust-free. Cover film when not scanning it, and check out my separate video on this topic. Here's the biggest takeaway from that video. When developing your own negatives, use distilled water and Kodak PhotoFlow or an equivalent in your final rinse. This won't just reduce water drying marks, but PhotoFlow contains an anti-static agent that reduces the chance of dust sticking to your film after it's dry. This is another reason why I scan film on the emulsion side, because it tends to stay cleaner during handling and picks up less dust. Enhancement tip number 3 is about using ideal light. A high Kelvin or cool light can give you better results when working with color negative film because it counteracts the orange mask. Warm light can be better for slide film, and generally white light is fine for black and white film. You can also look into using narrowband RGB light if you didn't already catch me talking about that in the earlier sections. Check out the article I linked for Jack Whittaker's site that I also mentioned earlier. It's a great starting point to explain the advantages here, and I think this is going to be the way forward with DIY digitization of color film. Enhancement tip number 4 is to develop a workflow and common preferences or profiles. You can save common adjustments you make to all your scans as profiles in Lightroom, for example. You might base this on your own preferences or on sample lab scans that you've rescanned at home. By using the lab scan as inspiration, you can build a few common tweaks that bring you closer and apply that across multiple frames. That could be sharpness settings, HSL adjustments, or other preferential adjustments that you didn't make during the initial conversion. Okay, so I could go on with more tips and enhancements, but I don't want to complicate things too much. Also, some of these topics warrant their own videos. DIY film digitization allows for multiple approaches, with trial and error being common amongst all of them. If you would like a written guide to accompany this video, let me know. I did one for my last scanning guide back in 2021, but could write a sequel to that if there's enough demand. Also, let me know what you struggle with the most or would like to see a follow-up video on. There's already a few that I have planned, but I'm always open to suggestions. Being in control of the process all the way from exposure to print is really rewarding, and I know that the scanning part can be the biggest bottleneck for many. But hopefully you found something in this video helpful and can constantly refine your own process. If you'd like to support the channel, check out the links I have in the description for ways you can do so. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.